My mission is to get to know myself better and to help you identify and remove the roadblocks that keep you from truly knowing yourself too. Whether today's conversation challenges you or not, I invite you to remember that this is simply two human beings on the journey of life, learning more about ourselves through honest introspection. What comes from that will look different for everyone. But if we can each walk away a little bit happier, even if those we love don't understand the source of that happiness, then it's for the greater good. My intention is to open the door for real conversation. I want us to share our stories and dismantle the shame and the guilt we all carry. Today's topic may be controversial for some, as my guest Bobbi shares her powerful story of becoming. For Bobbi, becoming meant transitioning from man to woman, from unhealed to healed, and from living in fear to making an impact. Welcome to Becoming Secure with Mike's Mindset. I'm really, really happy to have you on my podcast, Bobbi. And I would obviously love for you to share as much as possible with my listeners so they can get to know you better. But I do want to just introductory share that you are a transgender woman. Your name is Bobbi, and you have gone on a long, beautiful journey of your own. And what you and I share is the mission to get to know yourself better. And that is what you as well are trying to do on your journey, is to help inspire other people to also get to know themselves better. But although our journeys have looked differently, I am positive that we can learn a lot from each other. And with that, I would love for you to introduce yourself to my listeners, Bobbi, and share a little bit about what your transition have looked like and what it meant to you to get closer to yourself.
Hey, Maggie, it's a delight to be here, and hello, everyone. What an honor. We've been trying to set up this conversation for some time now, but finally we've made it work, and I'm so chuffed to be here and to be in this room. And I am currently in Australia, and I'm on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and it is winter here, but it is blue skies and sunny, and the beach is 5 minutes from the door here where I am, and it's a delight. So we come to this part of the world and say hi. It's awesome. But that said, yes, I am also a trans woman. Like, I'm a woman. I'm a woman, full stop, period. I also happen to be a trans woman. And like, I am a tall woman, and I'm a purple-haired woman, and a blue-eyed woman. It's just one of the attributes of who I am. And we all have attributes of where we are, and we've all been on journeys to become who we are today. And this is just happens to be my journey. So I identify 100% as a woman, and I really have been all my life in important ways, but it wasn't how I was identified at birth, and it wasn't how I was socialized. And I lived my life. So I'm now 65, and I've spent like 60 years as a man. And now as a woman, I am so happy. I am so happy to come back to my truth, to my authenticity, to live in a body that I adore, to be comfortable in my skin. But more than that, much more than that, is the mindset that I've developed over just a few short years in discovering my own power, my own strength. And through this journey, like, this is my real passion, is this quest for authenticity. And in finding my authenticity and in continuing to search for my own authenticity, I have found so much happiness, so much fulfillment, and so much freedom. I have never been freer than I am now, and I've never been happier than I am now. And that is because of my nervous system regulation, my emotional regulation, and because of my growing self-belief and growing self-trust, because I want to know who I am, who I can be. Like, one shot, one life. I've got one time on this planet, one brief shining flash of light that is me, that is Bobbi. Who can she be? Who can she become? You know, when I escape from the boxes that I put myself in, the conditioning, the programming, other people's opinions and judgments, all of that stuff, who can I really be when I let go of that? And that is the work. That is the work, finding the truth of who I am emotionally. Like, what is going on inside of me that causes me to behave in certain ways? What is the fear that I'm trying to overcome, to control, to suppress? And going into that is leading me to become extraordinary. And and I know that it's possible for all of us. All of us have versions deep inside of us. You know, like you can go deeper and deeper. There are versions of us that would just blow your mind what you're capable of doing. Yeah, so this is really my journey to know myself deeply, know what I'm capable of without limit. You
Mhm.
know, escaping that limitation that I put on myself, that's the quest. It's the most exciting adventure of all, Maggie.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I believe you. And I really like what you said introductory to is that you had two transitions in your life. Well, you talked about this when we were still for the listeners, we talked about this before we started the recording. You gracefully shared that you've had two transitions in your life. One is the gender and the other one is finding yourself and the true transitions that we all have throughout our life. But you also interestingly mentioned that the easy part was to transition gender. That was the easy part. And that actually surprised me because I would have imagined that, especially today, I don't know what it's like in Australia, of course, but living in the US is very tense right now, especially among the LGBTQT plus community. So I would have imagined that it was almost would have been harder today, but I'm happy that your experience is that wasn't the case. But can you share a little bit about, because you said that you were living 60 years as a man and then you transitioned. So I assume 5 years ago, granted that you're 65 now. If you found that happiness now, which I'm super happy to hear, what was that aha moment when you realized that transitioning into a woman was going to be what would give you the ultimate happiness?
Well, I didn't know, like there are children today who know at really early age that that wasn't me, you know, and also I didn't have models in my world. I didn't have role models of possibility, you know, and this is partly why I speak now is because I can be a role model for people so they can see a possibility for themselves. Like looking back, there are clues, you know, there are clues in how I showed up and my energy and how I held myself and expressed myself. And I've always been very feminine in that sense, but I didn't really know until kind of in my 40s. And I started feeling differently about myself and like doing different, you know, different things with my body, you know, with hair, with clothing and and so forth. And it was just like an unfolding of a new vision of myself that I wasn't expecting really. And it just sort of grew on me. And I came to the point where I started thinking, I should have been born a girl, you know, and this was a thought that kept going on in my head. And so I kept doing the things and then just following the path. I lived in London for like 25 years or something. And then at that point, life was so hard. It was so difficult, you know, with my family. So I'm divorced now. I have 3 children. They don't speak with me anymore. And somehow I think we must have drifted very far apart by now. But it was at that time that I started, you know, like seeking medical advice. And the first time I did it, you know, and we talk about courage. You know, courage is doing the thing that scares us.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it scares us, we still do it. And going into a doctor and saying, I want to be more feminine in my body, and that first occasion was so humiliating, the response that I got to that, and it just shut me down for years. But I was still, still I'd find clothing in my wardrobe, and, I'd be removing hair, and I was looking at, like feminizing myself in all kinds of ways. But that was the process, like it was almost like a project plan. This is why I say it was easy for me. Well, it wasn't easy, that's crazy to say that. But in terms of my mindset, I have 60 years of conditioning to recondition. I have 60 years of habits of thought and belief and ways of navigating the world to shift, because I want different outcomes. I want different results in my life. I always wanted more. I always believed I was here for more. Even when at the worst, hardest times, I always had the sense that I was going to do something extraordinary. So in my gender transition, in terms of change, we need an away from and a towards. And the away from, for me, in my gender was, this isn't my body. I don't feel comfortable in this skin. I had body shame. It was just showing up in my life in how I suppressed myself and didn't stand out or attract attention because I was insecure. But then I started forming this vision of who I could become. And I had this vision of me standing on a beach in a swimsuit with my hair falling onto my shoulders and blowing in the wind. And that's me now. That is my reality. I go to the beach. I wear my swimsuit. My hair falls on my shoulders. Like, this is a dream come true. Dreams do come true. That was a vision which I'd formed, and I've created that reality. But in my mindset through my life, I'm feeling frightened, and I was just like journaling about this a few minutes ago, about my childhood and the childhood hurts and traumas and things that caused me to behave in the ways that I have done all through my life. In fact, I was talking with my coach just earlier, and this expression, time heals all things, or something like that. Is that the expression? Yeah.
Time heals all things.
I don't believe that's true. I think time suppresses all wounds. What heals the wounds is actually going into it and doing the work. But in terms of my life, I hated my life. I hated who I was. I hated how I showed up. I hated being an introvert. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just wasn't my sense of identity. I hated my lack of results. I hated the fear I felt, around money particularly. Even when I had money, I always feared losing it. I spent my life trying to control everything through spreadsheets and planning and rules and how things have to be done. And that was the pain. I wanted to move away from that pain. I wanted to fulfill the dream, the true expression of me. And the other thing I have to do is just take action, take aligned action on step by step, day by day, moving towards my goals.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to hear that, and thank you so much for sharing that. And some people say that it's hard to leave a familiar hell for an unfamiliar heaven, which triggered the thought when you were sharing some of the stuff that you were sharing. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to share some of your first years in terms of your upbringing, your family, if you could give a little bit of context as to who brought you to be who you are today.
Well, what an interesting question. I have just been writing about this morning because I was talking to my coach, and let me say that I made myself coachable. I do the work for me, but we cannot see what we cannot see. So you asked me about my earliest days. I think it was my father. My father was an alcoholic, and, we had an emotionally challenging household, and it was like that into my 20s when I left home. And, I hated my father for 40 years. And, well, that was the story I was running, and I've only just recently kind of forgiven him, because I didn't feel I had the capacity to hold that hatred in me anymore. I just didn't have room for that anymore. And I know that he was doing the best he could with what he had and showing up as best he could, But my father was was the youngest son of three boys, and my grandfather was on the Western Front in World War One. Who knows what trauma has flowed through that dynamic? Talk about generational trauma. Like both my grandfathers were on the Western Front. This will pass through generations until somebody does the work. Yeah, there were moments of emotional suppression for fear of standing out, attracting attention, being seen. Children in those days were seen and not heard. You know, that was the programming that we all grew up in back then. I have no doubt that my earliest years were caused a lot of the behaviors that started to manifest, you know, when I was like 7, 8, and then through my childhood. And how come I ended up being an introvert? I recently did the Myers-Briggs test, introversion, extroversion. Apparently, according to that, I'm 93% extrovert. You know, so look at me. I'm 6 foot tall. I've got purple hair. I speak on stages. I'm an extrovert. You can't shut me up. And this is not the me that conditioned me for 60 years. This me was always in me. This me was in who I was before. This deconditioning of these life circumstances and beliefs and habits of thought, and you know, all the stuff that I thought was my truth, like my reality, it was a reality. Now I've got this other reality, and they are, you know, they both can be true. I like this one much better.
I mean, this one makes you happy.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm just so delighted. I've changed everything. You know, I've changed my politics, I've changed my identity, and just between you and me and the listeners, I've changed my sexuality. Who knew? Like who I'm attracted to. If I go to bed with someone, it's as a woman, but who I go to bed with is shifting also. When we choose authenticity, when we get out of like, am I living someone else's story or is it my story? Who do we want to be? Be intentional, be in integrity with my word to myself, build the trust in my own capacity to do what I say, both in here in the quiet, all by myself when no one's watching, and out there in the world. I gave a speech years ago, and I called it Stepping Fearlessly into the Unknowable Future. It was mostly about this mindset shift and belief shift and the fears that we make up. But every one of us goes through transitions in our lives, and the stories and learnings through my transition are the metaphor for all of us in navigating the challenges of life. You know, like going from where we are to where we want to go, and holding the tension of that, and just staying in the game because it's so easy to give up on it. It's so easy to go back to the familiar, the habits, the safe places, even if you hate them. If we are to become who we're truly capable of being, that's the tension we have to hold and learn how to manage the emotions of that. But it's irrespective of the stuff that happens around me. You know, like I've just lost, a shitload of money through a legal process, through a marital settlement. My sister, who took me to court, my mum died a few years ago, and the inheritance, and she wanted more than, anyway, but all of this stuff has happened, and I'm 65, and I'm a single woman, and I currently have no home, and irrespective of all that stuff, I still choose to show up. I'm still human, and the emotions still happen to me. You know, it's not like they don't. It's just that I don't wallow in them for days as I used to. When I started with my coach, like 3.5 years ago, I was so lost, and I was running a business, and I was running it from a real masculine place and a control place, and the lists of all the things to do place, and I lost that business, you know, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't fun. And then I started another business, no success whatsoever. And so there I am trying to succeed, but by following all the rules of what I thought was right and all of the ways of how I live, you know, like doing. If you're not getting the result, do more, work harder, stay up late. And I had tens of thousands of unopened emails. I had letters that I didn't open. My phone was permanently on mute because I was frightened about the challenge from all of those things to my safety, money safety, like emotional safety. And I started with my coach, and she got me to stop. Just stop all that and go and sit on a hill and do nothing. Don't listen to anything. Don't read anything. No music, no podcast, nothing. Just be and let my unconscious mind percolate. And then suddenly things started shifting for me. Like all of the can'ts. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can never make, like those I am statements. I am a failure. I am not successful. And all of that stuff that becomes your reality. All of a sudden, you started shifting perspective on it. I was never a failure. I was never unsuccessful. There are so many things that I can do. I can do this. I can do that. And ideas started coming up. And that was what led me to speaking. She said, what lights you up, Bobbi? And I said, I feel I will make more impact with what I say than with what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point. I want to go at the end. I want to do the same. I want to look back at my life and be like, I'm so happy I did all of the things that made me scared, and that I said yes to more things that I was frightened about, but didn't let myself be stopped from that. And my journey of finding myself and my journey of just becoming more and more introspective and getting to know myself better has also been deeply rooted in tracing back the steps of my childhood to understand how it all shaped me. And that's why I was curious to ask you that same question to kind of understand a little bit more. I do believe I still have a little bit of questions when it comes to the earlier years. Like you communicated that your father was an alcoholic. Did you have a present mother and siblings growing up? Like what kind of, what would you say like the family dynamic was like growing up?
I would not say we were emotionally close. I think my parents, my father was born in 1929 and my mother in 1934, and this is like the Depression around those years, and I believe there was a lot of scarcity mindset around that. There was a lack of things. There was a mindset of being thrifty and economizing. And we used to, as a family, there was a kind of a tradition of investing in shares, but always blue chip, safe investments. There was no risk taking. And so for me, this was like a game, but I think it was teaching me a lesson of scarcity and accuracy, needing it to be accurate. I think as children, like I said earlier, I think seen and not heard, and the kids sit in the back of the car and the kids sit at the, little separate child table and, these sorts of things when there was, I just look back and I think there are so many cases of lack of expression, lack of the ability to express ourselves emotionally. And, my father he became emotionally scary. And I remember my mum being so frightened. He was a manager of life assurance companies, and a few years he was like sober. And then he started his own business, and it gave him freedom to drink and to spend money on the business. And my mum was so frightened because he sold down life assurance policies and cashed out her security. I remember when I was like 18 or so, like as a boy, boys don't cry kind of thing. And the emotional pressure just got too great at one point because my older sister, she got treated like really poorly. There was so much pressure on her, and it's reflected all through to this day. But I remember bursting into tears privately, because I didn't want anyone to see, and just being so upset about, what was happening in my household. But I was more upset that he made me cry than about the thing, because boys don't cry. It's so damaging, really. And My younger sister, when she finished at school and hit 18, she's banged straight out of the house. And then I moved out as soon as I could after I was 23. And it was the best thing to move out of there into a house and start finding myself. Those days led me through a life, I say 26 years in the wrong marriage, 40 years in the wrong career, and 59 years in the wrong body. And 62 or 3 or 4 or 5 years with a crappy mindset because I'm still working on that.
You bring up a lot of good points here. I do want to acknowledge what you shared there about how you were mad about being triggered to this point of crying. And that was the point that made you almost more angry. The fact that you had to cry knowing that as a man, you weren't supposed to cry. I'm curious. So you say you had an older sister. Was there any difference between how she was treated as opposed to how you were treated in terms of the genders? Was she allowed to cry?
Yeah, the latter. I don't think any of us cried.
Mm.
I remember my mum. Funny, I was just writing this morning in, journaling about this, and I remember when I was about 8, my father had my mum up against a wall, and I don't know, was shouting. I don't know if it was hitting her or something, but she was certainly accosted and up against the wall. And I saw this, and I cried at 8, and I think he said to her, "Look what you made him do." It was so dominating. And I think coming from a place of, I don't think my father ever really grew up. I think he was the youngest of 3 and spoiled. And, quite a lot of this is quite immature. You always needed to thank him. If he give you something, and that's a really needy place to be, and it's actually disempowering from him because he gives his power to the thank you. If you don't get a thank you, then you can be angry, you can be pissed off, you get to be those things. So I have a de-triggering process that I go through when something happens, and I can go through this process and learn through it, So strategies, there are ways, and it's all learnable.
Mm.
And I'm so delighted because I wouldn't want it any other way. I don't want who I get to be in anyone else's hands, anyone else's control.
I'm so sorry to hear that you guys have this troublesome relationship in terms of what you and your siblings have been through. And also so sad to hear how you had to witness your mother being in such a challenging position with your father and how he chose to blame you for that even, or blame her for how you reacted to that situation. But my perception is, based on what you're telling me, is that you probably lived in a household where you could be blamed for someone else's actions real quick, and that accountability wasn't held in the hands that they should have. And I can completely understand and see how that causes a lot of emotional turmoil and causes a stopper on how you want to develop as an individual, not formed or shaped by someone else. So thank you for sharing that. You shared that you have been married. I don't want to assume that it's a woman that you've had children with, but I would love to hear a little bit about how that has been for you, being in a marriage, transitioning out of that marriage. And you mentioned also that you no longer have contact with your children. Is that also related to your transition? Can you share something about that?
Absolutely. She's a woman.
Your ex, she's a woman. Okay, yeah.
I was the husband. She was my wife, and we were married for 26 years, and we were together for 30. Oh, look, I can't say it was wrong, really. I still have stuff to clean up, emotions, grief and loss. I've lost a marriage, and my children don't communicate with me. It's not that I've not reached out. Sure, I could have done it more. This idea that as a parent, you are supposed to be there for your children all the time. We hear stories about people in prison and they write to their kids every day or every week or something like that. And I don't do that. And I'm curious about that. But I've also recently let go of this belief that that's who I'm meant to be as well. So I don't really do that anymore. And I will reach out. But what saddens me is that they aren't benefiting from me now or the journey I've been on, and they are still in a household of victimization and blame and mindset, in that you solve your problems by taking legal action and then being resentful. And these are choices. The thing about choices is that People don't know that they are making a choice. They think it's their reality. They think that's the truth. I do not know how much the gender is mixed up with the other stuff. I don't know if because I was so unhappy in my body, it reflected in the rest of me. I can't untangle those things. Beginning of 2018, it was then that I said to my ex, I said, I've got 4 things I want to talk about. 1 is I want to get divorced. 2, I want to continue living in Sydney. 3, I haven't got any money. 4, I'm changing gender. What do you want to talk about? The gender didn't even get a look in at that time. It was all about, we shouldn't have done this. We shouldn't have come to Australia. We shouldn't have, it was just stupid. But for me, that was the start of the divorce proceedings. And that was the start of me getting out of a household where I felt so disrespected and so unsupported. Emotionally, I had two safe places to go to. One was my doctor and the other was my electrolyst. So I went to see my electrolyst every week. And as women, we kind of know pain, don't we? Pain is a place that we have a lot of familiarity with, and it's no different for me. So I had 150 hours of electrolysis. It's a lot of money. The investing in me to become the me I am today in so many ways, including financially, it's been a lot of money. And I'm delighted that I've been able to do this and create the me, because I could have gone into scarcity and thinking I can't afford to spend that on me. I can't justify it. Like so many of us do. We don't spend money on ourselves because we don't think we're worthy of it, and actually believing that I'm worthy of spending this money, investing this money in me, in who I am today, and in the rest of my life, that was a big call.
In the next episode of Becoming Secure with Mag's Mindset, Bobbi and I will dive a little bit into the topic of the transgender community and the controversy that comes with that. We will also talk about transgender and sports, and generally how we both feel about what is going on in the world today. Stay tuned for another episode. Until then, stay curious and get to know yourself better.